Can you remember the time in your own childhood or adolescence when you formulated the desire to be an actor? Was there a point, someone you saw or someone who influenced you?
Well, no, I would say it was a gradual thing, as it probably is with most people. It's an unusual choice of occupation for a sort of centrally placed male American. You know, when you're out there in New Jersey, you don't suddenly pop up in the middle of your football practice and say, yes, I'm going to be an actor. You don't, it doesn't do it that way. I probably really started thinking about doing it after I was doing it. And vaguely when I was working at MGM in the cartoon department, a job which I got really mainly to observe movie making because I was sort of starstruck at that time. Still am.
Histories of you at school, they relate that your rendering of Managua, Nicaragua, showed people the early talent. How did that? What was Managua, Nicaragua?
Managua, Nicaragua was a hit song of the early '40s, actually, in which I sang it in a grammar school variety show in a red and gold crepe paper cape with a sort of bellboy's monkey hat on. I was rather flamboyant, I would say, for a 7-year-old or whatever it was.
When you got into movies, those early films, the pre-Easy Rider films, the Roger Corman movies, do they make you wince when you see them on television now?
Well, they all make you wince. I mean, I think work of any vintage, because, you know, you embody your own work, makes I would imagine makes anyone wince, or at least it should. I got to do a few things that I actually liked, and I must say that although I was in some of the most dreadful pictures of all time, that I was, and so were all the people I was working with, trying to do their best under the circumstances, and that's really all you need as a developing actor, is just to be trying to do it well. If you can live with the humiliation of, you know, being in something where it's pretty funny, you know, it's not bad for you. I always have felt that I was lucky, because if I had been successful that early, I'd be in a position where I was trying to make a comeback now. You know, almost all of the actors, for instance, the first show that I was in, Michael Landon was the star actor in it, and while we were doing the play, he got Bonanza. So all of my career, up until when Michael left Bonanza, went on while he was on Bonanza. And that was very good for him, you know what I mean? And everybody was envious, as I would be naturally at the time. But in reality now, obviously, I wouldn't trade it with him.
The turning point for you was certainly Easy Rider. Someone told me that you modelled your part, the part of the Southern lawyer, on LBJ.
Well, I didn't have the normal length of time that you would have to study a dialect, and since the character was from Texas, and some of the speeches that he had were sort of evangelical, Johnson's speech pattern, and which was familiar to my ear at this time from hearing it and so forth, you know, I mean, I didn't put it out in front as an imitation, but it was something true that I could refer to.
I understand you turned down The Godfather and The Sting.
Yes, that's true. And I think I had enough business acumen, I know I had enough business acumen by then to know that both The Sting and The Godfather were going to be huge hits. At the same time, I happen to think that Last Detail and Chinatown are, to me, they were the more interesting of the films. Godfather was going to be a good film. I'd always wanted to work with Marlon, but I was asked to play the lead in it, and A, I felt it should be an Italian person, and B, didn't have any scenes with Marlon in the script I read. And I thought, well, I'm liable only to get to work with Marlon once, and let's hope that it might be something where we really had to work together.
When you eventually did work with Brando, I understand you call him the guy on the hill, is it?
The big man on the hill.
Why do you call him that?
Well, he lives up the hill from me.
Good afternoon. No matter what your point of view may be, there is significant in the growth in Chicago and across the United States, if not around the world, of a movement known as the Black Muslims, a movement which is popularly believed to preach a doctrine of hatred for the white race and the ultimate supremacy of the Negro race. The headquarters of the Muslim movement is here in Chicago in the 5300 block of South Greenwood, and its leader now is known as Elijah Muhammad. He's in residence here. The most active person in the spreading of the Black Muslim movement is Elijah Muhammad's second-in-command, who calls himself Malcolm X. And Malcolm X is our guest today on City Desk. Across the desk, our panelists this week are NBC newsmen Charles McCune, Floyd Calver, and Len O'Connor. And Mr. X, may I begin by asking you, if you will please, outline for us the platform and policies of the Muslim organization.
Well, the platform that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, our religious leader, stands upon is the platform of complete freedom, justice, and equality for the 20 million black people, or so-called Negroes here in America. And he teaches us that because of the seriousness of the condition that our people now find themselves in, that it's absolutely impossible to solve our problems with means other than religion. And he teaches us that the religion of Islam is the only religion that will instill within our people the incentive to stand on our own feet. And instead of trying to force ourselves upon whites or force ourselves into the white society or blame the white man for our predicament and constantly beg him for what he has, he says that the only way that we can solve our problem is to unite together among ourselves, among our own kind, clean ourselves up, rid ourselves of the evils that we've become addicted to here in this society, and try and solve our problem ourselves.
Then I referred to the popular belief that the Muslims preach a hatred for the white race. You do not subscribe to this, then?
No, I've never heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teach or preach hatred for anyone. He preaches hatred against evil, against drunkenness, against dope addiction, against poverty, and against having to beg for the things that a man is supposed to have. But I've never heard him teach us or any of his followers hatred toward any human being.
Do you think that some of his followers possibly then have misinterpreted the word that they've heard and follow a practice of hatred for the white race?
I don't think that any Muslim practices hatred toward anyone. We have businesses around the country that are patronized by whites, and we have many businesses here in Chicago, and our customers are white as well as our own kind. And a white person can go into any of these places of business, and he'll have to admit that he is treated with more respect, and he finds more dignity there than he will find among the so-called Negroes who profess to be teaching love for everyone.
Twice you've referred to the Negroes, the so-called Negroes. You find some fault with this description,
Yes.
I gather.
Mr. Muhammad teaches us that Negro is a term that was applied to us during slavery by the slave master. And right today, it's a term that is used only to point out the descendant of slaves. It's never used for black people, period. Africans can come to this country. They aren't called Negroes. And if they are called Negroes, they resent it. So if Negro meant black, as we've been taught, it would be a term that would be applicable to or applicable to everyone. But he says that it is something that means a slave, or something who is, it means something that has been left out of society, politically, economically, educationally, and otherwise.
You don't think of it as an anthropological term?
Definitely. It's not an anthropological term, it's a slave term. And it was a term that was invented in America and was used by the slave makers, slave traders, and slave masters, and attached to the property or the chattel or merchandise that our people represented in that particular day.
Mr. O'Connor.
What is your real name?
Malcolm X.
Is that your legal name?
As far as I'm concerned, it's my legal name.
Have you been to court to establish that you are?
I didn't have to go to court to be called Murphy or Jones or Smith. Excuse me for answering you this way.
That's
if
all right.
a Chinese person were to say his name was Patrick Murphy, you would look at him like he's insane, because Murphy is an Irish name, a European name, or the name that has a Caucasian or white background. And a yellow person, Chinese is a yellow man, and he has nothing to do or no connection whatsoever with the name Murphy. And if it doesn't look proper for a person who is yellow or Chinese to be walking around named Murphy or Jones or Johnson or Bunch or Powell, I think it would be just as improper for a black person or the so-called Negro in this country, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, to walk around with these names. And therefore he teaches us that during slavery, the same slave master who owned us put his last name on us to denote that we were his property. So that when you see a Negro today who's named Johnson, if you go back in his history, you'll find that he was once, his grandfather or one of his forefathers was owned by a white man who was named Johnson. If his name is Bunch, his grandfather was owned by a white man that was named Bunch.
Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery.
Was there any line, any point in the genealogy of your family when you did have to use the last name, and if so, what was it?
The last name of my forefathers was taken from them when they were brought to America and made slaves. And then the name of the slave master was given, which we refuse. We reject that name today.
You mean you won't even tell me what your father's supposed last name was or gifted last name was?
I never acknowledge it whatsoever.
Let me ask you about the status of Elijah Muhammad. First of all, is he ill?
I spoke to him today. He is in better health than he has been. He's suffering from asthmatic bronchitis.
Is that why he didn't attend your rally on last Tuesday?
Yeah, the only reason that he didn't attend was his ill condition, and the weather here, especially on that particular day, was of such nature that it would have been almost insane for him to come.
Well, now, did you hold that meeting last Tuesday because it coincided with the general election, the primary election?
I think if you study the history of Mr. Muhammad's work and religious work in this country, we've had our convention on February the 26th every year for, I think, the past 33 years.
Well, now, while you don't care to discuss your former name or the name that the slave master gave to your antecedents, it is a matter of record that Muhammad's last name was Poole, Elijah Poole.
No, that's the name that his slave master gave to his grandfather or great-grandfather, but that's not his name.
Well, his mother and father thought when they called him Elijah Poole that was his name.
They didn't know any better.
Well, if they didn't know any better or not, they thought that was his name.
Yes, sir, but, sir...
Well, what I'm trying to find out is when did he cease to be Elijah Poole and get to be Elijah Muhammad?
In 1931, I think it was, in Detroit, he was taught the true history of our people and made aware at that time that he was wearing an English name, and by not being an Englishman, he looked out of place. And his teacher gave him the name that he's wearing today, Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad.
All right, now when did he become what he purports to be in your literature, the son of Allah?
I've never heard the Honorable Elijah Muhammad referred to as the son of Allah.
The prophet of Allah. Okay.
I've never heard him referred to as the prophet of Allah.
What do you refer to him
Messenger of Allah.
All right, the messenger of Allah, and I appreciate the correction.
Yes, he says that a prophet is somebody who predicts the future, and he's not predicting the future, whereas a messenger is someone who carries a message that has been given to him by one who authors that message.
Well, now, who gave him...
The role of rock rebel could have been written for Liam Gallagher. Hey! And he plays the part to perfection.
He stands there, his whole body language says, I don't care, here's our music, like it or f*** off.
They did very well very quickly, they suddenly had money, and yeah, it really was then. Come on, let's have it.
He's really into the idea of rock and roll.
I thought you were a geezer. I thought you were a geezer.
I just think he lives his life exactly the way he wants to. I don't think he's bothered by what we write about him. He just does what he wants to do.
All he's normally doing is saying, leave me alone, I don't want to talk about my missus, or saying, I don't particularly want to have my photograph taken for the 1,000th time today. Now, you or I might choose to say that in a more polite way, or send them a solicitor's letter, Liam chooses to give someone a kick in the cobblers every now and then.
He has a classic celebrity relationship with the press. Can't live with them, can't live without them.
Me and Liam came to blows it was a few years ago, and I approached him outside the Q Awards with a photograph, and it was a photograph of him kissing a young lady in a pub, and I merely said, what's going on here? And he didn't like the question too much, so he punched me in the face. I fell on the floor, and I was a little bit worried, not so much from him, because he's quite a lot shorter than me. He's only about 5'8", I'm 6 foot. But the guy behind him was as big as a house, and I just thought, if he gets involved, then I'm a goner.
Liam was at it again last year. He celebrated the birth of his son Gene by belting a photographer in a pub. Later that day, he tried to pick another fight with a snapper outside the Portland hospital.
I thought you were you just had a baby, blood. No problem, blood. Yeah, bring it. Wanker. You look like a bad dick. Bring it. Come on, then. Pull your cameras away now. You don't need it. I'll have you know, just had a baby. No, so you look like a dickhead.
The Liam that I know and that his family knows, he is a polite young man, you know, and really nice young man.
And I'll wipe your ass, man. You look like a gay boy's ass, drawers. And I'll do you any time when you boys ain't in. All right, no, babe.
We'll return to Liam later, when he's cooled down. When you get tired of playing fast and loose, the best thing to keep your profile up is to generate a spat with another pop star. Liam Gallagher and Robbie Williams used to be mates until...
Both Liam and Noel felt that Robbie was trying to live vicariously through their bad boy reputation. And hey, hang on a minute, as I think it was Noel said, aren't you just a tap dancer from Stoke?
It started with Noel and Liam calling him Blobby Williams.
Really fat. He's like a plum.
It didn't help either that Liam had started seeing Robbie's ex, Nicole Appleton. His mammoth ego had suffered a direct hit.
The comments didn't stop, and then it just got worse and worse until Robbie offered Liam out for a fight, I do believe.
And then every awards do after that, they said, I'll have you, and it was a bit handbags at dawn.
Despite Robbie's obvious weight advantage, it seems the clever money was on the Manchester Mauler.
You've got Liam Gallagher. Comes from a family where there was a history of violence.
Come on!
Years of sibling fighting. He's in a rock band, he swears a lot.
Get out of garbage before you do get slapped. Out of there.
Versus, in the blue corner, a former member of Take That. A trained dancer. And I really think, unless Robbie's got some really good, like, ballet moves, that Liam could have him. I think just, you know, trip him up with a Parker and he's down.
And my money would definitely have been on Liam, because Rob is too much of a nice boy.
I don't think Rob would beat my 8-year-old grandson. I think my 8-year grandson would kick the arse out of him.
They had their opportunity to resolve it one way or the other, whether it was fisticuffs or, you know, or words, and they didn't say a word to each other.
It seems that after all the bad blood, the pair have finally called a truce. But now Robbie has turned his attention elsewhere.
Well, I don't really want to beat up Liam. I want to beat up Noel. Because he's a little and he's a mean-spirited, nasty little dwarf.
Hi!
Hi.
What's happening?
What are you doing here in Frankfurt?
I've been asking myself that for 3 days. You know what? I'm exchanging musical notes for federal coupons. Which means, as I've said many times, every musician has his price, and you'd be surprised how low it actually is. What? Actually, I'm enjoying myself. I'm here playing at the Fender booth for the Fender folks.
Yep.
Doing some stuff with my buddy Roscoe Back and Mark Schulman on drums. Papish. Great. I started playing guitar when I was 12 years old, and I always wanted to play guitar. I was bewitched by Jimi Hendrix at a very young age. So Hendrix and Clapton, especially like Cream era Clapton, these guys were gods to me when most people were into like Kermit the Frog back home and watching Mr. Rogers. I was watching Mr. Jimmy, you know what I'm saying? Country Jim, as I like to call him. And so I wanted to play guitar, so when I started playing, I picked it up quite fast. Within 9 months, I did my first gig and I was ready to go. I had a Fender Lead 1 back in the day. It was a single pickup guitar, but I really wanted a Strat. But I ended up having a Telecaster, and I got Strats. I had a 335 that I played for many years, and that was my main guitar through college. And I always had a Tele, and I drifted back to Teles and Strats. I actually weaned myself off the humbuckers, because once you get used to that thick-ass sound, it's hard to go back to the single coils, but I forced myself to do it. I kind of learned early on that I wanted to work for myself, because most musicians are mutants, and myself included. And so I actually, when I first got finished with college, I went to school for music, although I really majored in beer. I'm going to be clear about that. And but I went to school for jazz guitar, not to be like a Joe Pass type of individual. I just wanted to know how to play over changes and know what that was all about. But then I just really realized I always wanted to do my own thing. I needed to do my own thing again. So I started doing that, and then I got signed up with, the Fender thing really took off. I got signed up with Steve Vai's label, and that was more of the instrumental stuff. But I subsequently got signed by another label in Europe, Pro Vogue, and that was more of the vocal-oriented stuff. And then I did some records for this label called ZYX in Europe. And then I've written a bunch of stuff for Hal Leonard, instructional stuff. And between all that stuff, I've been able to kind of balance this thing of being married and having 4 kids and making sure that they don't end up on the talk show circuit for their dad not being around a lot. So I balance it out with, being not gone all that much. I mean, I have to travel in order to make money, but I'm not gone 300 days out of the year. Let's put it that way. So that's been good. So I mean, don't get me wrong. If somebody would call me up from a high-paying touring ensemble and want me to tour some things, I would be glad to do it. If because as I said, every musician has a price, and you'd be surprised how high it actually is. So it's all good. I can't complain, although sometimes I do because I'm good at it.
I made it through the wilderness. Somehow I made it through. Didn't know how lost I was until I found you. I was beat, incomplete. I'd been held. I was sad and blue, but you made me feel. Yeah, you made me feel shiny and new, like a virgin, touched for the very first time, like a virgin. When your heart beats next to mine, gonna give you all my love, boy. My fear is faded fast. Been saving it all for you, 'cause only love can last. You're so fine, and you might make me strong. Yeah, you make me bold, 'cause you love thought out. Yeah, you love thought out. What was scared and cold, like a virgin, You're so fine, and you're mine. I'll be yours till the